Hello, I'm Anawiltus, and today I'd like to talk a little bit about tradition. So, my particular viewpoint on tradition is that the value in having a tradition is not in the tradition itself, but in its source. Therefore, I have a sort of foundationalist approach to traditions that if a tradition has a valuable foundation, it's important to affirm that foundation for the tradition itself to be a valid tradition, whereas a tradition that does not have a firm foundation is a tradition that could, in many ways, obfuscate the truth. That is to say, if you have a tradition based on false premises, then that tradition ultimately takes you away from the actual truth and reality. And as a realist, I seek to behave in a way that corresponds to reality. So if I take a tradition that denies fundamental aspects of reality, then I'm obviously not behaving in a way that acknowledges reality. And if I'm not acknowledging reality in the way I behave, then that leads to situations where my behavior will ultimately lead me into various problems caused by the discongruence of my expectations brought to me from my tradition compared to the real consequences of actions. So, in that sense, traditions themselves are only valuable insofar as they have a solid foundation. And that being said, I think it's worth noting that when you're examining a tradition, we shouldn't take this approach of examining a tradition and saying that it's something that people have done for a long time, but we don't actually know why people did it or what it's for. But instead, you need to reestablish the actual source of it. Because to say that you're simply doing the same thing that people have always been doing could lead you into a sort of obscurantist pattern of behavior that leads you to deny certain fundamental truths, including the truths that led to the foundation of the tradition in the first place. So I have this foundationalist approach, in Latin ad fontes, returning to the sources of a tradition in order to examine them. And rather than maintaining it as a tradition per se, instead maintaining the true knowledge that is behind the tradition in order to be more congruent with reality and to preserve that which has been discovered and is known to be effective. So in that sense, when people say return to tradition, I have to ask, which tradition would you like me to return to? Because tradition is not something that exists in a single form. There are multiple traditions in the world, and I think that in the real world, traditions, when you're comparing them and they have conflicting elements, somebody's got to be wrong. So in that sense, it makes sense to say that rather than appealing to a particular tradition, which leads you to essentially obfuscate the foundations, it's more important to appeal to the truths from which these traditions are derived, or if the traditions themselves are rooted in falsehood, to appeal to the truths which disprove the traditions. So that's my take on traditions. Tell me what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have a different position on traditions? I'd like to hear your opinion in the comments section below. Thank you all for watching, and I will be seeing you all next time on Wiltos Over and Out.